Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Status Device Cloud. So this video is for you users who have a Status Device Cloud account and you have been emailed your username and password to log into the system, and we'll get started. So using that username or password that has been given you, you're going to go to statusdevicecloud.com and you're going to put in your username or password and log in. And what you're going to see is your deployment. So this is your own private instance of the Status system running hosted out in the web. And what you'll find here is some addresses. These are connection information that you're going to need in order to use the development tools. And you're going to have this download development tools button that's going to put the applications on your desktop that you're going to need for building a solution. So looking at these addresses briefly, the first one, this is your status server. That's the address, the endpoint of your status server that's running out on the web. This is the address of your data connector that's running out on the web. And you're going to use this data connector, but you also can have a data connector that's running on your local network, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. If you're using B-Scada sensors, this is the location of your sensor server. This is where your gateway is going to be sending your data, your sensor data to, and the sensor server is going to be listening to that sensor data and bringing it into the system. And the last one is a link that you can log into, and this is where your end users would log into the system and see the pages that you're developing. So we're going to assume that we've downloaded the development tools, and once we do that, we're going to have this launcher application on our desktop, and that launcher application will bring up this little utility here, and these are the handful of programs that we use most of the time for working with Status Device Cloud. So I'm going to begin by going into my model designer. So the first thing we do with the system is we create a model, and in the model designer we go, and by default with a new system the username is administrator with no password, and we're going to paste in the endpoint of where our status server is located, and that was from our settings, and we're going to log into the system. So I already have a little bit of a model set up here. I've got a flow meter, and I've got a pump, and if I want to add another type, I can just click the add type button, enter the name of the type that I'd like to create. If I want to add more properties onto my flow meter, I can just click add properties, select my property type, and I can give that property a name and add it into the model. So once we have our types created, we create our virtual assets. These are the real-world representations of our equipment. So here's a flow meter now, flow meter A1, and there's the properties on flow meter A1. And we can set up other things. We can set up our alarms and workflow and different types of stuff in the software. And then the last thing we're going to do is data mapping. So with data mapping, we need to connect to our data connector service. So I'm going to go back to my browser, and I'm going to grab the address of my data connector service, and I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste that in here. And some of you may have been given a password as well that you'll need to enter. And I click connect. So that connected to my data connector service up in the cloud. So now if I would like to maybe bring some simulated data into that flow meter, what I would do next is I would create a new mapping. So a new configuration, I'm going to call it sample. My provider type is going to be data simulator. And I want to make sure that my server address is also pointing to the right version of Status Device Cloud. So I'm going to have to put that endpoint into here. So now the data connector service is going to be talking to this version of Status Device Cloud, so I can make sure the data is flowing to the right spot. So next I'm going to do my mappings. So I click Connect, and I go into my mapping configuration, and these are my assets. This is my model. So there's my flow meter, and there is the double property on my flow meter, the flow property, and on the right side is my simulated data. So this is where I can do add mapping. And now this live piece of data has been mapped to this property in my model. And I can close this and I can save it. And now I can launch another program. So the program I'm going to launch is my model browser. And this lets me walk through my model. And I can pull up any asset in my model and get information on that asset. So if I go to my flow meter, for example, I can pull up a property table on that flow meter, and I can see my flow is updating with the simulated data, and I can also pull up a trend and take a look at that simulated data in a trend. So there we just set up our software for that. So we've got our types, our assets, we've shown that we've got data, simulated data flowing into our model now. The next thing we might want to do is to launch the Mimic Designer and create a quick front end to this application. And again, we use our endpoint to connect to the status server when we launch these applications. And we're going to create a new mimic. I'm going to call it the flow mimic. And I'm going to grab a nice radial gauge and put that out on my design surface. And I'm going to go to my view, and there's my assets. Here's my flow meter. And I'm going to bind the flow property to this asset by double clicking on the flow property. So that's bound. I'm going to save this screen into my model. And I can run it. Now this is running now in a Windows Thick client. Windows Thick clients are great for desktop computers, digital signage, kiosk type applications. So they're good for that. So this is the Windows Thick client. If I would like to see that screen in the web, we need to go back to our connections, and we're going to use this address here, this web address for the web gateway. And we're going to log in to our Status Device Cloud deployment through the web browser. And I can go into Shared Mimics, which is where I saved that file, and I can open up that flow file now and I can take a look at it. So there's now the live data in the web browser. And this will, of course, can be loaded up onto mobile devices. It'll work great there. Now, one thing we need to consider is when I launched that web browser, I had to navigate down to the screen, and we don't always want to do that. So what we can do under assets is we can set our users, we can set our password for our administrator, for example. Maybe we don't want it to be empty. We want to change that. And we can also set what the default screen is going to be for a particular user. So for example, I'm going to create a new user. I'm going to call this user Ron. And under Ron, we are going to select Gateway Settings and select Create Asset. And what we can do with the gateway settings is we can specify what the mimic is going to be that Ron is going to see when he logs in. So I'm going to click Add Asset, and what I'm doing now is I'm browsing to that flow screen, and I'm making that flow screen the main screen for that user. So the next thing I'll do is I'm going to go back to the browser here, and I'm going to log into that gateway now using our new user Ron. and it's going to automatically bring up that screen that we associated with him. Now, we connected to, with our data connector, we connected to the data connector service that is out in Status Device Cloud. When you install your utilities, one of the options that you have, one of the checkboxes that is there, is to install the data connector service local. Now, this is important because if you are using data from devices where the communications is not web friendly, for example OPC DA, or if you're using direct drivers to PLCs, you cannot get that data to the data connector service that's running out in the web. So in that case, we install the data connector service locally. So here's the data connector service with the B-Scada logo, and doing our mappings, we configure the data to come from the devices and then up into Status Device Cloud. So we connect to a data connector service that's local on our network, not the data connector service that's sitting out on the web. So that data connector that's local, if it's running on the same PC that I've got my tools installed on here, the address is localhost 21,000. So I can click connect. So now I'm connected to my data connector service that's running on this local computer here. And I can now go in and create a new configuration, and I can select what data I want to bring in, maybe SNMP, or maybe I want to do Modbus or Siemens, something that is a local type of live data that you wouldn't be able to pull in from the cloud. So by doing that now, I'm going to be setting up this data connector service to be pulling the data from the devices, and then the data mappings will tell me where in the model out in Status Device Cloud that information is going to be written to. And that's it. So we've set up a sample of Status Enterprise with some live data out inside Status Device Cloud. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email us. Thank you.